Welcome to the Liberating Beauty Podcast. I'm Rebecca, your host, and together we'll explore the spirit of beauty, how beauty invites new possibilities, enlivens us to inhabit our innate creativity, and connects us more deeply with ourselves and with each other. We'll have conversations and share reflections that invite you into a frequency of gentleness, truth, and mystery. I'm so glad you're here. If you find the Liberating Beauty Podcast meaningful, please consider supporting our work. To donate, follow the link in the show notes to the Together in Beauty website, home to this podcast, along with other offerings to accompany you on your journey of spiritual becoming. Please subscribe, rate, and share this podcast wherever you listen. And as always, thank you for your support and for being here with us.
Be with beauty, liberation.
Hello, this is Rebecca, your host, the very first episode of the Liberating Beauty Podcast. In this podcast, we will be exploring the enlivening quality of beauty and the really magical way that it connects us across space and time. Like most days, I found myself just this morning reflecting on the aspects of beauty that most enlivened me, and it occurred to me that the nature of beauty brings forward spirituality in a way that becomes tangible, that when we come in contact with that which is beautiful, which evokes possibility, we are at the same time coming into contact with the frequency of the divine, or whatever kind of universal experience we have available to us while we're here, while we have these bodies, as we walk the earth. And so really this podcast gives us opportunity to pause and to reflect how in every single moment, no matter what is happening and whatever narratives we may be receiving, and about the nature of separation and distrust, that there is always this other possibility of seeing and experiencing and creating beauty all around us. It feels like a Love Actually kind of quote. Anyway, this idea of liberating beauty is connected to a larger body of work that I'm bringing forward into the world under the name Together in Beauty. And I wanted to give you, I'll tell you like a story of where that name and where all of these ideas around beauty came from. So the story is that my mother became very sick pretty unexpectedly in her early 60s. She had a condition called Lewy body dementia, and it was early onset. And we came to learn that oftentimes when dementia comes earlier in life, the cycle through that illness can be quite fast, which was the case for her. And when she died, it came to me that beauty would be this frequency by which we could stay in connection across realms, wherever it was that she would go and wherever it was that I would stay, that we would be together in beauty. And beauty as that frequency came because of how she had lived her life. Often in the way of her outward expression, her style. She was a kindergarten teacher in Chicago, and she, in other grades, always with very young children, and it made an impression on me that she would get up in the morning, at 5 a.m, to go to work and put herself together, that she would wear the same beautiful things that she crafted and constructed as this real work of art. The same things she'd wear to her kindergarten class that she might wear to a dinner party. That was her way, her beauty way of being, of staying in that energy of softening, of... Actually, I wonder if she would say softening. That's probably more of my words. She was a bit mysterious. A little bit of Scorpio energy. She was a little mysterious. But there was something there that her beauty in the way of how she dressed herself and moved in the world evoked curiosity, delight in herself and in other people. And so this idea that we would be together in beauty was that... I also am someone who really is affected by the things that I can see, by the things that I wear, by the things that I do, by the things that I smell or touch or whatnot. And so that beauty is a very real experience for me. And so that we would continue our conversation, as it were, after she passed, was this very powerful elixir and balm when I thought about what it would mean to not have her in the way that I'd become accustomed to relating her in physical form, that we could stay in connection through beauty. And that idea has swirled around my consciousness for years. And it's just been in the last couple of months, you know how these things go, that you receive, if you're open, a message. Messages land when you're ready to hear them. And the message really was, how is it that by staying in connection with beauty that we can come to liberate ourselves? And that's where this idea of liberating beauty comes from. When we stay in the knowingness of who we are, of what we love, of what inspires us, we begin to free ourselves and free each other. So this is the evolution of the together in beauty to liberating beauty to why it is that we're here today. And I'm so delighted that we'll have a chance to be in conversation with each other through this podcast as we explore the multidimensional way of being that is beauty, that is beautiful, and what it evokes in each of us. And we'll do that in a number of ways across the different episodes. So we won't be getting all of these all at once every time we connect. But some of the ways that we'll explore the nature of beauty, some of them will be through my reflections or poetry, the things that I'm sensing, the things that I'm hearing as I accompany other souls in the world through my work, and bringing these themes to you in conversation. Some of the episodes will also feature conversations that I have with other beauties in the world, and learning how it is that beauty enlivens and inspires them. And I also will have opportunities for you as our listeners to call in and be in conversation with me, and to explore how sinking into beauty, resting in beauty, being nourished by beauty changes the way we think about ourselves. And so offering support to you as our listeners in conversation will be another format, another vehicle for us to explore the nature and liberating quality of beauty in this podcast. So I'm not going to say too much more about beauty today and the different aspects that will come next in subsequent sessions, so please do tune back in. But I did want to take a little bit of time just to tell you a bit more about myself and how it is that I came to be hosting a podcast and what that's all about. So here's a bit more about my story. I have been enjoying lately trying to connect with what it felt like to be me as a very little girl. Because you know how it goes, at least for me, when I think back to earlier parts of my life, sometimes the story that I've created about that time, or the story that's been told to me about that time, I realize it's not the same as what actually happened, for so many different reasons. There's stories that are meant to hide things. There's stories that are just convenient. There are stories that are meant to make us feel good. But I wanted to get underneath the story about myself as a little girl and remember what it felt like to be her. And I'm still in that kind of exploration, but my feeling is that I was an extremely creative little girl, as many children are. Extremely creative, huge imagination, always singing, always dancing, always making up characters, and really living in that imaginal space. And I also I sensed and felt things very deeply in my entire life, definitely even as a very, very young child. And I think that was hard for the family that I was in, to have that kind of ball of, it was that energy, because it's not like I was so energetic. I've always been someone who, by the end of the day, I'm exhausted. It's not about that. It's about the intensity of how I take in the world and the intensity of the questions I ask, and always have, that was disruptive in its own way. And it goes without saying, I hope, that that's different than saying I wasn't loved or appreciated, but it was a journey. How do you navigate this level of intensity, curiosity, and just move amongst people for whom sometimes that was appreciated and sometimes it wasn't. So I noticed that as I got older, that there were things I would stop asking and things I would stop doing for fear that I would tend to take myself out of circulation if too much. It brought too much, asked too much, and it was the subtle gestures, facial expressions, twitching, that were a response to some of the things I would say. And you accumulate enough experience, and it becomes easy for that kind of self-monitoring and contraction to become a norm, such that becomes who you think you are, this more sterilized, tighter version of yourself. And one of the things that I did to facilitate in some ways this contraction was I became a student of the mind, which is a beautiful thing. Everything in its place, of course, but went to college and then grad school and then more grad school, and trained as a researcher. And I noticed the ways that it was in some ways very easy for me to sink into the rigidity of academic work as a defense mechanism. I'm sure, looking back on it now. And yet, the thing that I've been finding, it's not funny, but it's, I don't exactly know how to describe it, but what I've been learning about myself lately is even when we are in a state of contraction, who we really are still comes through. And thank goodness. Thank goodness for the impossibility of ever really abandoning that which has always been yours, that which has always been ours. So that creativity, that, for me, kind of obsession with words, not just how they fit together or what they mean, but how they sound and how they feel in the most creative ways possible. Thank goodness that never managed to go away. And my goodness, in some ways I tried, and yet it was still there. And over time, that desire to be able to connect with the spirit of words, the music of life, the infinite ways of knowing and of being that span spiritual paths and culture and nature and science. Thank goodness that's there. And it's now in my life that it's become so clear that to be able to hold and walk these paths and ways of being simultaneously is what we are being called for. What is being called for all of us. It is the opposite of a message of separation. And I find that holding of all that we are profoundly beautiful, profoundly challenging, profoundly challenging on many days. But to believe that we are spacious enough, capable enough, creative enough to hold multiple realities at one time is what enlivens me to get out of bed in the morning. That we can continue to become more of who we are, and that is ultimately in service of all of us, is that's the gift of this moment. That's the gift of being handed the keys to this lifetime, of saying there is something that is available and that it always has been and that always will be, that inspires us to continue to be more of who we are. So that's a bit about my story of how I went from the imaginal, creative child to this more contracted, fearful, but always yearning, young adult, now to midlife, where it's like you don't need to turn things off in order to be okay. And it's like just the opposite. We are allowed, and I believe encouraged, to go deeper into the gifts, the truths, and the feelings of what it means to be ourselves, and trust that has a catalytic effect on all of us, for all of us, when each of us leans into that even more. And it's wonderful to be in community with others as we practice that profoundly courageous way of being, and I'd say beautiful way of being together. So if you like what you're hearing, I hope that you will join us again for other episodes of the Liberating Beauty Podcast. It's wonderful to get this conversation started with you today. Take care. Thank you for listening to the Liberating Beauty Podcast. To learn more about the podcast, my work, and how I can support you on your journey of spiritual becoming, head over to the Together in Beauty website or email me at rebecca@together-in-beauty.com. It's an honor to accompany you on the journey. A huge thank you to our multi-talented producer and co-creative director, Mapumba Cilombo. To learn more about Mapumba's work as a producer, sound engineer, and musician, check out the show notes for a link to his website at mapumbamusic.com. Many thanks to you, our listeners. None of this would be possible without the energy, encouragement, and vitality that you reflect back to us each week. Until next time, may you walk in beauty.